reach here. You! I thought they had found you. Premium. Excellent. Good. We can continue unabated with your education. In my recent research, I came across another event which I believe will leave you cold. It left several bodies very cold. Cold and dead. His name, Armando Ocampo, age 16. A capable schoolboy who is to discover a deadly family secret. Location, Mindanao, the Philippines. Date, 2019. Armando was a thin and rugged boy with a keen interest in soccer. His sister had just celebrated her 18th birthday, having graduated school a few months earlier. They lived together with their parents in a small town on Mindanao, where they were born and raised. They lived on the edge of a huge and wild forest filled with wonders, which they used to explore together before maturity dragged both in different directions during high school. On one fateful night in late 2019, before the world would become ensconced within the insanity of plague and economic disruptions, Armando awoke with an unusual desire to see his sister, to meet her, to make sure she was okay. Armando wasn't sure what was driving him to find her, but he felt it important. Perhaps their ancestors were beckoning to him to avoid danger, or perhaps he was just stricken by a need to see her and make sure she was safe. He peeked into her room, but she wasn't in her bed or closet. Wondering, Armando silently glided through the small house. His sister was nowhere to be seen. And then Armando went out to the back porch, where he was repulsed by a horrid and sickly sight. He tried to scream, but his initial outcry was preceded by a deep inhale, and he choked on his own saliva. When Armando was able to regain his voice, he had no desire to scream. He could merely stare at the oddity before him, standing on the porch. It was a pair of legs, his sister's legs, standing erect, but the upper half of her body was gone, leaving the cut-off half at the waist. Within the pelvic region was a cauldron of writhing intestines stewing in a dark bile and mucus consomme. He instantly knew what was going on, and while it was shattering to his perspective on life and family, Armando knew he had to act. Armando knew he had to act soon, or else a worse horror would befall his community and his island home. Somewhere, sometime, Armando's sister had sold her soul and made a perverse compact with the evil one. She sacrificed a human life and now continued to murder to support supernatural power and gain supernatural favors. His sister, Dalice, had become a vampire, a demon, a succubus, a witch, and was a parasite on the human race. In short, she was now an Aswang. Her only need now was to aid her self-preservation, paid for with the blood of the unborn and the innocent. At night, Delice's upper body was no doubt flying about over Mindanao while her legs remained. Armando kicked the legs in frustration, but they didn't budge. It was as if they were rooted down to the porch and even the earth below. He returned with a large black machete and began hacking the flesh apart, decimating his sister's lower half chunk by chunk until only bloody pieces remained scattered about the porch. Delise had been sucking a fetus from a woman's womb as the woman slept that night. Delise's bat-like wings floated her into the window of the bedroom earlier. The smell of birth and life creation was strong, colors wafting through the air, which only the supernatural could perceive, sense. Casting a sleeping spell over the woman and her husband, Delise need merely spread the woman's thighs and probe her long, tube-like tongue inside to suck out the formative human delicacy within. Delise's task was almost completed when she felt the harm to her lower body. Agony swamped the grotesque figure of the bifurcated female. She writhed about and sped out of the window, intestines dangling from below her lower opening, her demon wings speeding her back home. The Aswang flew at highest speed and arrived at the scene of her lower's mutilation. Delise screamed in frustration, in horror, at loss of her vital functions and sexual organs. Without the ability to reconnect to her body to form a whole, she would be dead within a day. Her torture became sorrow, and her enlarged and darkened eyes bled tears of blood. Danger! She could sense danger. With the aid of ethereal watchers about her, Delise turned and caught the blade of a machete inches before it would sever her head in twain like a coconut. It was Armando. Her brother had laid in wait to attack and destroy her transformed figure, to speed her murderous soul to hell itself. She grasped the blade and used momentum to drag him forward, grabbed his elbow, and with superhuman force twisted him around and threw him into the back wall of the house, where he collapsed. The Aswang retained Armando's blade and chose to make good use of it. She raised high and came down, but missed her brother as he rolled away. She swung again and again, flying over his head to catch him in a blind spot. But he used the features of the house to thwart her treacherous advances. And then he was gone. He had disappeared. Delise flew about, searching for her perfidious sibling. Yet he remained inconspicuous. She contemplated a moment, then flew directly upward and shot off into the distance. Armando left a hasty note for his sleeping parents, scrawled general words and ideas, so they would understand why his sister's legs were diced up on the back porch. He then gathered up a silver knife, kept for ceremonies, a couple of other blades, and a contraband gun he found in the woods many years ago. Probably hid by a guerrilla or villain of some ilk. And then Armando was off into the forest to find and destroy his Aswang sister. Delise had other ideas. Revenge and justice weren't on her compromised mind. She craved self-preservation. No one was moving. Nothing was happening below her as she flitted about. After a few hours, Delise grew anxious, grew desperate, and took action to sustain her existence. Like a dive bomber, she flew directly downward at ever-increasing speed as she folded up her wings and faced the ground. And just before hitting the earth, she swooped back up and swung her machete with all her might. It was a precise motion, lopping the head and neck off of a sleeping cow standing in a field. The beheaded cow didn't even flinch, but blood was blasting from the opening as the head rolled far into the field. Delise quickly lashed out with her lower flesh and intestines to conjoin to the cow's body. She had hoped to do this with a human of choice, preferably a woman around her size and age, but the bovine would have to suffice that night. Once the two were conjoined and all the flesh sealed, Delise could feel the cow blood pulsing through her. It was weird. It was dirty to her. But it was necessary. She deftly walked herself into the deep woods and then commenced to rest, hiding her upper body, her female half, behind some trees and rocks, in case anyone would stumble onto her and cause trouble. Armando continued to seek Delise, but without success. Sun would be coming up soon, and he feared she would be either hid or she would do something desperate. But he hoped she would be dead. News would soon arrive that would prolong his hunt, proving she survived and was thriving. Light spilled over the fields and forests of Mindanao. People began to shift and wake and soon work. For a group of 4 farmhands in a remote area of Mindanao, this would be their last moments. They heard a trampling sound coming from the forest near the road where they walked. Crashing out, a twisted sight broke their resolve, and they ran. It was a cow with a female's body attached like a centaur. Delise trampled one, the slowest, as he turned to run, breaking his body and skull under her hooves. The other 2 were no match. Humans are too slow for an Aswang. She wielded her blade and decapitated them all. None were desirable to Delise's wants. She spent time to drink their blood, using the heads as decanters. When sated, she left behind the husks of 4 men. Their bodies would shortly be discovered, and their curious murders would go unsolved. A curiosity for the local press. Armando, though, connected to the news item, and resolved to take responsibility for his wayward sister's evil transgressions. He wouldn't return to school or home until he had found and destroyed his transmogrified sister. He would live in the jungles and trace her path of destruction, he vowed. Until she was ended, the young boy only hoped she couldn't have time to propagate her species amongst others of his beautiful island homeland. To this day, less than a year later, I am still following the case of Armando and Delise. If anything more happens, and I do have feelers out looking and searching for the truth in the Philippines, I shall tell you immediately. Stay tuned.
Like and subscribe before I die. And ring the little bell or you will surely go to hell.
Oh, we're telling spooky stories. This is not a spooky story. Oh, there's no way on the couch I can say.
Depends how you look at it. It is kind of spooky.
I guess so.
Wait, that's it? That's the end of the story?
That is a